we knew that the ultimate goal for what the struggle needed was unification. And without unity, you can talk all the talk you want, but if you don't have a unified group of people working on the on making this happen, then you're just like a voice in the wind. So how can we unify? What can we do as poets to bring about the unity of black folks? So David Nelson had an idea. He says, "Dude, poets are basically individuals. They go off into the woods by themselves. They do their own thing. They don't work in a collective." He says, "I'm thinking about hooking up a collective of poets just to give black people an example of how serious we've got to be to unify, to get this foot off our necks. And if we can get guys from different walks of life, together in one group, that might be a good example." And at the time when he mentioned this, I was working for him. He had an anti-poverty program, and I had a little job there, and he was writing poetry. I was writing poetry. I started writing poetry because I was trying to infatuate older girls. I never liked girls my age, so I thought if I wrote a poem, I'm like 14, I'm lying, telling them I'm 17, stuff like that. And I'm writing poetry. David was writing poetry too. He was writing poetry in Spanish because he's very fluent in Spanish. And we were sharing our ideas and stuff. And when he said that, I thought it was cute, I thought it was nice, and that was like a year before the group actually started. What really was the inspiration or motivation for me to be a part of the finding of this group was the fact that they killed Dr. King on April 4th, 1968. I lost my mind because I felt that was a real slap in the face to black people, because King was about peace and nonviolence, and here he is standing on a terrace in Lorraine Motel smoking a cigarette and they blow his brains out. I really was messed up behind that. Even though I could have never marched with Dr. King, because I don't believe in turning the other cheek. But my family revered him, so I in turn respected him too. But that was what really set it off, because I called David up right after they killed Dr. King and said, "Listen, man, we got to get this group going. If we don't get this group started, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to start doing some crazy stuff. I know it, man. I got to do something." I just felt the need to respond to the killing of Dr. King. And David said, later he called me, he says, "Listen, I put our names on the list to read poetry at Malcolm X's birthday." All I ever knew about Malcolm X was that he was a tall, orange-looking man who my aunt once told my mother that he was speaking the truth and they were going to kill him. I couldn't even ask my aunt why were they going to kill Malcolm, because I was a kid, and if I didn't tell the truth, I was going to get my ass whipped. So why are they going to kill this man for telling the truth? It didn't make sense to me. And then he got killed about a couple of years after that, and then I realized, but my teacher, she told us who he was. But the fact is that on his birthday, which was very appropriate for the last ones to get started, because it was his political message that we were expounding on more so than King's. We weren't integrationists. We were black nationalists. We were coming from unity for black folks by any means necessary. And that's what the message was all about. So we came together. It was a need. You know how we say necessity is the mother of invention? Well, there was a need for us to come together to try to provide an example to get black folks to be on the same page. Unity is something we gotta have, because we got to fight this from a unified front. We can't be fractured, we have to work together. So that was the basic impetus of the poets.
So I've always been prompted, even though you write, you need to find your voice. I'll write something and I'll give it to my mentor just give it back. "Yeah, I haven't found your voice yet." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about, find my voice? What is that?" But as the time went on, I was starting to understand a bit more about, the belief in self, to latch on to things that you've done research on and really be sure about what you're talking about. Because it's one thing to write about something, it's another thing to actually believe in that and actually take from the page and put it into someone's life in such a way that they can talk about it years on, even when you're dead, to a certain degree. And though you knew there was a need here, there was an urgency here, did you feel like you found your voice at that particular time, or did you find your voice a year or 2 years after, or did you find it before?
Well, talking about finding your voice, here I am, Midwestern boy in the Midwest, and you know, working my way through the streets. You know, I did a lot of hustles and things in the streets, but I became a nationalist by a brother by the name of Ahmed Evans up in Cleveland, Ohio, during the Huff riots. And he had said, matter of fact, he's one of the most true revolutionaries, black nationalists I have ever met. Because he said, you know, when they find me, they're going to find me on top of roofs and I'm going to kill police. And that's when they found him. During the Huff riots, he had killed 3 police.
You hear the program called Kill a Cop a Day.
And he had killed 3 police.
He had killed 3 cops already.
It touched me so much, you know, he went past. But then I came out of hustling and I had a job at Firestone Tire Rubber in Akron, Ohio. But I became this black nationalist, me and a bunch of other brothers. So we got together and formed this little group called the United Black Front in Akron. And we went down to this festival at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And the last boys were going to be there, and a brother by the name of, there was Alton, there was a Nixon was known with Alton, what was Alton's last name?
Alton X.
Alton X,
Yeah.
and brother.
Alton X,
and
yeah.
the other brother wore the glasses.
Yeah, Billy Suniali Bear,
So
yeah.
all these brothers was there. So our group was put in the head of security at the time. And I became the head security man. And so I'm at the desk and Abiodun comes up and, you know, he's like, and this is when he was much younger, and his voice was much more blunted than this now. I'm Abiodun. I'm one of the last sports. I'm from New York. I said, okay, you know, this is Ohio, and you got to check in, brother, you know, because we're trying to be able to protect the sisters and the young kids, anything going on. So he kept going through this. So I said, well, you know, I had 2 guns on. I pulled up my khaki jacket, so he told me, I said, well, if you don't check in, you're going to check out. So he hit the gun and he said, okay, I'll check in. But then when he got on stage, and his domain, his bailiwick, he said, you know, who was that crazy motherfucker out there? Y'all got to do that. You could kill all of us before, you know, any white people. So that little thing, but when they got on stage and did what they did with the poetry and the drums, knocked me out because I began to write poetry. So I said, well, listen, man, we made up, we talked later on. So I said, listen, I want to do what y'all do. So dude said, well, okay, we got a lump called the East Winds on 125th Street in Harlem. We decided to come up to New York, come to the East Wind. So I had to go back to Akron, Ohio, went through a little riot, police run, and I had to get out of Akron. So I wound up, I didn't have no money. I lost my job at Firestone Tire Rubber. I got fired because they said I was a terrorist. They didn't want no terrorists working in their weapon factory. So I didn't have no money, wasn't hustling no more. So I pawned my sister's record player at the time. You know the record players, you could stack the little 3 1/3 and they fall. One of them, didn't nobody know it.
A high five.
You know, and I pawned the radio. I pawned the record player for $25. And at that time, from Akron, Ohio to New York, it was $15. So I had $10 left to, you know, buy a little food along the way at the stop. So when I got to New York City, I wound up with a book of poetry, a pair of jeans in a bag, and 22 cents in my pocket. But I was going to find my voice. And as you say, find your voice, and that's where I had to go to find my voice, to find him, the other last poets, and whatever, you know, happened to me after that by becoming one of the last poets and working with the last poets, you know, because the thing, you know, everybody tells me about being a poet. Like I tell everybody, to be a poet, you don't have to go to college and study classes. You don't have to, you know, get to the inner workings of a haiku. If you can acknowledge, you know, if you can observe and you can acknowledge and you can express, you can be a poet. If you can observe and you can acknowledge and then you can express that, you can be a poet. It's simple, it's easy. So that's what I was always doing. I was good at acknowledging, observing, acknowledging, and expressing. So, and then working with them and doing what, you know, because I was writing poems a little too short, and doing would say, you know, start writing some longer poems, because that ain't gonna make it, you know. So one day in the park, in Mount Morris Park, where they started, he looked at me and said, Omar, you know, what have you learned since you've been in New York? I looked around for a minute and I said, niggas are scared of revolution. He said, okay, write that poem. And the rest is history.
That's right. And the thing about it, that you know, finding your voice is so key. And Umar's method was similar to mine, because before the very first time we went on stage, I was intimidated. We're going to be in Harlem. I'm going to be on stage in Harlem in front of Harlem people. And I wasn't raised in Harlem. I went to church in Harlem every Sunday. But I was raised in Queens, which is considered far softer than Harlem. People in Harlem are like, hard. This is like, man, the whole Harlem seemed like the Apollo stage. And you go up there and you don't do well, the Sandman comes out and snatches your butt off stage. And I was afraid that I was gonna not measure up. So what I did to find my voice, to find a way that I could really, I came to Harlem and did exactly what Umar just said. I watched, I observed, I listened. I didn't say a word. I walked around Harlem listening to everything that was being said. I was like a spy, man, because I wanted to connect with these people. I'm gonna be on stage in this park in a couple of weeks doing a poem. Well, I don't even know what I'm gonna write about. And the line at the time was, "What's your thing, brother?" So I'm a black Muslim, man. I'm a Nation of Islam. "What's your thing, brother?" "I'm a Black Panther." And I said, so thing is the word. And thing became like a revolutionary pronoun. And I went on and took that and I wrote a poem. "What is your thing, brother? This is a black thing with a saved black woman and children." Now, I'll be honest, I teach poetry. I know that was probably one of the worst poems I've ever wrote. But I had the slogan, I had the politics was correct. And that's the same thing with Umar. His politics was correct. But the thing about it, the voice and our voices, we were expressing this from what we felt. And that, because above everything else, our voice, and see, this is the difference too with what we have done and say what other poets have done. Our voices stand out as much as what we're saying stands out. And that's a difference. And I realized that difference when I bought an album by Langston Hughes and Charlie Mingus. I paid $42 over 35 years ago for this album, thinking that I was gonna go to heaven. I mean, you couldn't tell me Charlie Mingus, a great jazz bassist, playing behind the guy that I admired, Langston Hughes, and I see the track, this is Negro Speaks of Rivers, Landlord, all this is on this album. Are you kidding me? I mean, I paid money, I went broke buying that album. I bought a bottle of wine, I got some weed, I went home, rolled up a joint, poured a glass of wine, put that bad boy on the turntable, the bass started, boom, 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 boom. I said, whoa, I'm going to heaven. And then Langston Hughes, I don't know ain't touching rappers, my soul. I said, holy cow. He couldn't perform. He didn't have a voice. He could write, but he did not have a voice. What we're doing, and it's really interesting because a lot of people want to be poets and they don't have the performance skill. You have to be able to deliver. There's a lot of people who can really, really write, but they cannot recite. That's a whole different thing. So we took the stuff, we put it on the page where you can read it and get something out of it, but you can hear it from us and get more.
And I guess where that bass comes in, right? The equivalent of that, and I hear it through the drums. Now, at Latitude, now, just before I introduced you guys, I could just feel that coming from behind me. And it was just something like to just pay attention to as I'm hearing the sound, just sent out to the masses of people. And then you came on, and it just worked. And this is a sound that has been perfected over time. I don't know if you guys, and it's fair to ask you now, if it's something that you felt, okay, this is a nice mix here in terms of the drums, in terms of voice. And I suppose this is where it comes to you, but in terms of rhythmically did you guys go through the process of, this is how my voice is going to sit on this sound.
I kind of grew up listening to them, so that was my beginnings.
That means you're younger than we are?
Well, a little bit. Just a little bit. But you see that great, I'm great.
Yeah, that was nice when you put that. Grew up listening to it.
I did, man. That was like listening to the album and listening to the voice, because like you said, it was a combination. I think the distinction of their voices really made a difference too. It was really the sound of this is the mix of the voice, the sounds of the voices. And the power behind that, plus with the drumming, was like, well, I was studying the drum by listening. I remember a time I would listen to the record and listen to the drum, and I'm trying to figure out, because I had no idea of how to create those beats. So time went on, and I learned the skills, and I took lessons, and blase, and we come together. But from having that beginning, it was easy to kind of work with them, and when I was asked to be a part of the group, I was just going right back to that first album, and I would go there mentally and try to blend it where it does not overtake what they're saying, the voices. So it's not like I'm playing and I'm not listening. But with any kind of poetry, because I work with the young kids too. And not to play, you want to hear, if I can't hear their voice, then you can't hear it. So it's like blending the sound where you can, and having different vocabulary in terms of what type of rhythms, So that comes in with my studies. So I'm able to pick from different things and create things within those rhythmic, those 3 tones that you hear, those 3 drums. I could do it with 2, but 3 is like the 3 tones, and then with their voices.
But it goes back to our original drummer. He set the pattern.
Exactly, right.
He set the pattern for rhythm. And to Elijah, he used to carry his drums around in a duffel bag.
That's what I learned from.
And if you said, Elijah, I got a new poem. And he was,
you get embarrassed.
Yeah, he'd sit down, he'd sit the drum down. And he said, okay, Omar.
The drums would be in a duffel bag, right by his side.
Okay, he said, well, go ahead, Omar, Abiodun, what's your poem? If he didn't go in that duffel bag and take that drum out,
Let me tell you something. I wrote a poem called Get Hip. You couldn't tell me it wasn't the strongest poem I'd ever written. I mean, matter of fact, I was so positive about this poem. I got my grandfather's Remington typewriter. It's the first typewriter made, and typed it up. It was 2 whole pages. I was proud of this poem. It was coming down on all them bougie niggas out there in Queens. That's where I was raised. And I'm just ranting and raving about them. I'm going in. You can't tell me this ain't hot. I go to the East Wing, that's the home base of the Last Poets, to put this poem in the program. And the thing was, like Umar said, you had to get on stage, you had to read your poem to the rest of the guys, and Elijah, our conga player, who wasn't well versed in figurative language, about metaphors and similes and all that kind of stuff. But he's sitting there with his drum, and I'm on stage. Get hip! I'm saying something stupid. And he didn't even look at his drum. He didn't even look at it. And we were friends. He didn't even look at the damn duffel bag. The duffel bag stayed silent the whole time. And I did the poem, and he just sat there. And then Kane said, we're not reading that crap on stage, man. That bullshit. That ranting and raving about the people that you are. That's who you are, nigga. Shit. And I was mad. I wanted to jump down and punch Kane in the face. When you write a poem, that's a personal thing. It's like me taking a piece of my soul and putting it out there, and you just denied it. I hated him, but it gave me a great lesson. And then by the same token, Elijah let me know when I was on, because I had seen a poem take place in one of the known soul food restaurants, Sylvia's, which is very popular now. She's internationally known. At the time, she just had one greasy spoon, one spot. And I was in there eating.
It wasn't greasy either.
Huh?
It wasn't greasy.
No, but it's called a greasy spoon. That's what they call those places. No, the place is always good. We ate there, whatever. I'm not coming down. I ate there. I loved it. Come on, I ate there all the time. I worked you there. Yeah. Get out of here. When you didn't have no place to eat or nothing else, come on, stop it.
No, don't tell me.
The fact is that I love Sylvia's place, and I was in there, and to show you the love, I'm sitting there eating food, and 2 little boys came in there, and they ordered a lot of food. Chicken, potato salad, collard greens, cornbread, and they ravished that stuff down their throats. And then they looked around. I could see what they were up to. And when nobody was looking, they started to head out. And I ran after them, because that's how much I respected Sylvia in her black spot. Because I just thought that was insulting. You can't come here, order some food, and then run out on the person. That's not cool. Sylvia stopped me at the door. She says, those are 2 of our junkie babies. I'm just glad they got something to eat. And that touched my heart. I told Sylvia right then and there, I said, well, give me a pen and a pad. And I wrote a poem.
I said, I was there.
In that place, I did a poem called 2 Little Boys. And then when I went on stage to share it with the rest of the guys in the group, Elijah's conga was right by his side. He couldn't get the top of the duffel bag off quick enough before he started playing behind me.
See, because, what did James Brown say,
If it feels right.
And it was not even that, but about the drum. James Brown said, okay, what is that you play? You play it on, that's the drum. What are you playing? So, that's the drum. So James Brown said, okay, you can forget the scholarly,
It's about the drums.
It's about the beat.
That's right.
It's about the beat. If you got the beat, it's gonna feel good. It's gonna make you feel good. It's about the beat. And Elijah knew how to beat, and he does it as he does as followed by Bible. Because I was listening to Niggas Scared Revolution about. I had to start dancing. See, sometimes now listen to some of my old poetry. I mean, when Elijah put down there with the Shaker Ray and the drums, I was man. This was a part of it.
And the thing about it,
they just listened to the words, but they were dancing to this. They were celebrating.
You know, there was a power behind the voice and the words, you know, more so than when it became more musical.
Yeah, right,
It
right.
was kind of waning a little bit. I mean, there was some pieces that were pretty good, but it was. I know for me, but because at the time I wasn't a member, you know, I was just like everybody else, and I knew I was waiting for that second album, just with all drums. I think Chastisements was kind of like that.
It was different. That was different. That would have music.
This is madness.
This is Madness was the second album, but Chastisement came as the third. But like
it was that, you know, looking for that flavor, just the drum. And
oh yeah, that was classic.
That was really.
And the thing about it, what made it special to me is that if you notice, the people listening, not any poem has the same. Every poem has a different rhythm. I mean, it's like you identified by the beat as well as your words. I mean, he didn't just play the same beat for other poems. That didn't happen.